He walked into the cafe like he owned the world, because in a way he did. Dressed in a tailored suit, phone buzzing with calls from boardrooms and investors, Ayan Malik was the kind of man people noticed. The cafe, tucked in a quiet corner of the city, was just a stop between meetings. Nothing fancy, just a place to grab a quick coffee. But what he saw next stopped him in his tracks. There she was, behind the counter, hair tied up in a messy bun, sleeves rolled up, moving quickly from table to table. It took him a moment to recognize her. But once he did, it hit him like a wave. That was Maya, his classmate from high school. The same girl who used to beat him in math tests, who once shared her lunch with him when he forgot his own, who used to laugh the loudest at the back of the classroom. Back then, they were inseparable. But life, as it often does, had taken them down very different paths. Ayan had gone on to build a tech empire, his name flashing across business magazines and television screens. Maya, on the other hand, was working tables in a small cafe, her spark dimmed but not lost. He hadn't seen her in over a decade, and now here she was, serving coffee with a tired smile. At first, he didn't know what to do. Should he say something? Should he walk away quietly? A million thoughts ran through his head. Would she recognize him? Would she want to? He didn't want to embarrass her or make her uncomfortable, but something in her eyes, a flicker of pride mixed with exhaustion, made him stay. He sat down at a corner table, watching her move around, still not sure what to say. His heart was racing, not from nerves, but from the weight of everything unspoken. This wasn't how he imagined meeting an old friend after years. He thought of all the times they'd talked about the future, the big dreams they had. And now their worlds couldn't be more different. What happened to her? Why was she here? And more importantly, what would he do next? Just when she turned and their eyes finally met, something shifted. What Ayan did after that moment wasn't just unexpected, it would change both their lives forever. But before we get to that, let's go back a little and see how these two lives that started in the same place ended up on such different roads. 10 years ago, Ayan and Maya were just two regular kids in the same dusty classroom in a small-town government school. They used to sit near the window, swapping stories about where life would take them. Ayan had always talked about building something big, something that would take him far beyond the small-town limits. Maya, on the other hand, had a softer dream. She wanted to write, maybe teach someday. She had this calm confidence about her, like she didn't need to prove anything to anyone. But life, as it often does, had plans of its own. After school, Ayan got a scholarship and moved to the city. From there, it was a mix of long nights, hustle, and a few lucky breaks. He started with freelance coding projects, sleeping on floors and eating instant noodles. Over time, those late nights turned into big contracts, then startups, and eventually success. Now, he had offices in 3 cities, a personal assistant, and a lifestyle most people only dream of. But even with all that, something always felt incomplete. Maybe that's why the sight of Maya hit him so hard. He remembered how Maya had always been the bright one. She was sharp, kind, and had this way of making people feel seen. Everyone thought she'd go far. But clearly, something had gone wrong along the way. And now seeing her here in this little cafe, it just didn't add up. Back in the present, Ayan sat at the table, pretending to look at the menu. But his mind was racing. Did something happen to her family? Did she have to drop out of college? He couldn't help but notice the way her hands shook slightly as she cleared a nearby table. Not from nervousness, but maybe from exhaustion. She looked thinner than he remembered, like someone who'd been carrying too much for too long. When she finally walked up to his table, her eyes for just a second. Recognition. She knew it was him. But instead of surprise or excitement, her face tightened. She forced a polite smile and asked, "What can I get you?" Her voice still had the same warmth, but now it was wrapped in something heavier, something he couldn't quite place. And that one question, simple as it was, held 100 unspoken words beneath it. He wanted to ask her everything. What happened? Why didn't you ever reach out? Why are you here? But all he could say was, "Hi, Maya." And just like that, the past and present collided, two lives that had once been side by side, now standing worlds apart. What she said next, though, changed everything. Maya didn't say his name. She didn't ask how he was or what he was doing there. She just wrote down his order, black coffee, no sugar, and walked away like he was just another customer. But her hands trembled slightly as she held the pen, and Ayan caught it. It wasn't anger exactly. It was something deeper. Hurt, maybe, or distance built over years of silence. As she moved behind the counter, Ayan watched her closely. She didn't talk much to the other customers. She moved quickly, eyes low, smile polite but never real. She looked like someone who had learned not to expect much, and that hit him harder than he expected. A few minutes later, she placed the coffee on his table without meeting his eyes. "On the house," she said quietly, then turned to leave. He reached out before she could walk away. "Maya, can we talk?" She paused, just for a second, then turned slightly, her eyes still not meeting his. "Talk about what, Ayan? The years you disappeared, or the years I had to rebuild everything without a single call from anyone who said they cared?" There it was, a flash of fire beneath the calm, a wound that never healed. He wanted to explain, to tell her that life swept him up, that he never meant to vanish. But something told him it wasn't the time. Not here, not like this. Instead, he nodded slowly. "I didn't come here by accident. I heard about this place from someone. I didn't know you worked here." She finally looked at him. "Yeah, well, I didn't plan to either." And with that, she walked off, leaving him with a coffee that had already gone cold. Ayan sat there, unsure what to feel. Guilt, regret, confusion. He had thought he was doing well, better than well. But what good was success if it meant losing people along the way? Meanwhile, in the kitchen, Maya leaned against the wall, eyes closed. Seeing him again had shaken something loose inside her. She didn't hate him, but she wasn't ready to forgive either. He had left without a word, without a goodbye, and the years in between had been anything but kind. Unknown to both of them, someone else in the cafe was watching the interaction. A man seated at the far end, reading a newspaper he wasn't really reading. His eyes flicked between Ayan and Maya, his expression unreadable. Because this story wasn't just about an old friendship. There were things Ayan didn't know, things Maya never told anyone. And if those secrets came out now, everything could fall apart. The man in the corner stood up and left a tip that was too generous for just a cup of tea. Maya noticed it, but didn't think much. She was still trying to steady her breath. The sight of Ayan sitting there, his presence so sudden and sharp, had thrown her whole day off balance. For a moment, old memories had come rushing in. The laughter, the long walks home, the late-night talks about changing the world. And then just as quickly, the silence. The years of absence, the letters she never sent, the phone calls she never made. Outside, the sky had darkened. Rain tapped lightly against the glass, and the cafe slowly began to empty. Ayan was still there, untouched coffee in front of him, eyes fixed on her every move. He knew he shouldn't push, but he also knew this wasn't something he could just walk away from. Not this time. He finally stood up and walked to the counter. "Let me drive you home," he said gently. She looked at him dryly. "I don't need a ride. I take the bus, like most people do." "Maya, I'm not here to pity you," he said, keeping his voice low. "I just want to talk." She hesitated, then finally sighed. "Fine, my shift ends in 10 minutes. While she cleaned up behind the counter, that man who had been watching earlier reappeared outside the cafe window, now in a car parked just across the street. He lit a cigarette and kept his gaze fixed on the entrance. There was something unsettling in the way he waited. Calm, too calm. Maya locked up the cafe, pulled her jacket tighter, and followed Ayan to his car. Inside, the air was quiet except for the soft hum of the heater. She didn't speak right away. He didn't either. The silence sat heavy between them. Then she broke it. "You know, my dad got sick right after school. I had to drop out of college and take up 2 jobs just to keep us afloat. He passed away 2 years later. I never told anyone, didn't have the energy to." Ayan's jaw tightened. "I had no idea." "You wouldn't," she replied. "You were too busy becoming someone important." Outside, the man in the car took a photo of them with his phone. And in that moment, what Ayan didn't realize was that his past had just collided with something much darker, something that involved Maya in ways he never imagined. And as they sat in that car, unaware, the truth was already closing in. Ayan sat frozen, trying to process everything Maya had just said. He'd been so focused on his own rise, on chasing deadlines and closing deals, that he never looked back. He had assumed people from the past had simply moved on, like he did. But now, sitting beside Maya in the dim light of the car, he realized just how wrong he'd been. "I should have called," he whispered. "I should have checked in." She didn't respond, just stared out the window, her reflection blurred by the rain. There was more she wanted to say, but something stopped her. A shift in her posture, the way her eyes flicked toward the side mirror. She went stiff. "What's wrong?" Ayan asked, sensing her unease. She didn't answer right away. Then she said, almost too quietly, "That car behind us. It's been parked there since this morning." Ayan looked over. Same car. The man from the cafe. His instincts kicked in. In business, he'd learned how to read people quickly, how to spot when something didn't feel right. And this didn't feel right. "Do you know him?" he asked. Maya hesitated. "Not exactly, but I think he knows me." "What does that mean?" he asked, his voice rising just a little. She swallowed hard. "There's something I didn't tell you. After my dad died, I got involved with someone I thought I could trust. He helped pay some bills when I was desperate, but later things changed. He wasn't who he said he was." Ayan's face darkened. "Who is he?" "I don't know his real name. He vanished one night, but I think he's been watching me since. He shows up near the cafe sometimes, never says anything, just watches. I told myself I was imagining it, but..." She looked back at the car. "That's him." Ayan's grip on the steering wheel tightened. This wasn't just an old friend struggling through hard times. Maya was in danger. And somehow, his reappearance in her life had stirred the shadows she thought she'd left behind. The man in the car suddenly turned on his headlights, flooding Ayan's windshield with light. He didn't move, just sat there. Ayan turned the key. "We're not staying here," he said firmly. Maya touched his arm. "If we drive off, he'll follow." "I'm counting on it," Ayan replied, eyes focused, his mind racing. He wasn't going to let this man scare her anymore. Whatever this was, it had gone far enough. But what neither of them knew, what would shake them to the core, was that this wasn't just about Maya's past. This was personal. And it had only just begun. Ayan pulled the car out slowly, keeping his eyes on the rearview mirror. As expected, the man followed. Maya sat tense beside him, clutching the seatbelt like it was the only thing holding her together. The streets were nearly empty, rain misting the windows as they turned corner after corner. Ayan wasn't just driving, he was leading the man somewhere public,